So today I wanted to talk about not squandering your opportunity, all right? So I did currently have my channel titled as basically for LSAT prep. I was thinking about changing the name. I'm not sure yet, but today I wanted to talk about once you get into the atmosphere, kind of giving you hints on what not to do. All right? And especially when it comes to minorities, especially African Americans. So, whether you got into a top tier school or a lower tier school, if you've gotten and you've accepted and you're literally in your semester right now, depending on where you are, probably about second week, third week, maybe you'll be listening when it's a little bit further ahead. I have been there, and I think I have some things to tell you about how to potentially make things go south. So I want to help you make sure that things are going the right direction. All right, so first of all, at this point, you should definitely be keeping up with your readings. The more time goes on and the further you fall behind, it is not good. It is absolutely not good. At some point along the way, there will be a break, but I think it's not until about Thanksgiving. So depending on when you listen to this, you would definitely need to be keeping up with your stuff already. You know, it's just, things move fast in a way. So that's number one. Keep up with your readings. It sounds easy, it sounds straightforward, but there are some things that could be hindering this. All right, so secondly, I'd say minimize going to social events. I went to many different social events for reasons that should be obvious if you're a minority. I didn't really know people. It was an opportunity to get to know people. A lot of the times they didn't really look like me, but there were interesting people, and I went to a good amount of the functions. All right, so that's something you want to be mindful of, is over-involvement. Third thing, I'd say make sure that you are staying active and getting involved in some type of yoga or some type of meditative practice. My school didn't have this, but it would have been awesome if they had this at the time. I would have had to rely on myself to provide these things for me. This is why I have to do a channel on the ideal law school to choose, because I didn't choose that, and that didn't work out for me. So make sure you're staying active, enjoying life. There's more to life than just law school. And where I went, we were told basically, you're leaving your family alone. You just basically, in other words, live, breathe, eat, sleep, law school. Your friends shouldn't expect to hear from you, and you're pretty much isolating yourself within the law school experience. There might be a little bit of truth to that, but you don't want to overconsume just being in that type of environment. It's very stressful, and it's not nice to yourself. That's not nice to yourself. So remain human, remain active, and that's going to help you. All right, so another thing, and I think I'm losing count. So I talked about reading, not getting too involved, and then also remaining engaged in terms of mental stimulation, relaxation. And I'd say the next thing is to make sure that you're talking with your family and your friends. Don't overdo it, but make sure that you're consistently staying informed about how they're doing and connecting back with them. This is just something that helps things go a little bit better, even if it's just a small text. If you know that somebody tends to talk a lot, be prepared. I don't know, I have to go cook. Something's burning, or my phone is dying. Maybe don't put it on the charger so it's legit a true thing, but make sure you're talking with your family, make sure you're talking with your friends. Not too much, at least maybe once a week. Really set some time, especially the most important family members. That is so vital because day to day, it's life. All right, so next thing I'd say, you can join a study group, but make sure that you are doing what you need to do. Because if you're in a study group and you haven't done your share of work, that isn't really going to help you, and it's going to be more wasting your time. So if you know that you haven't been even keeping up with readings and things of that nature, you probably need to be in a corner somewhere reading a book. Reading cases, catching up, doing your case briefs, etc., etc. All right, another thing. Try to make sure that you're attending all of your classes. This is not the place to be skipping classes. I never did this, but there were some times legit that I just could not make it to class. But I was special. So they would have someone come in there and record the class. But if you can, being in that atmosphere and not missing a single class is the best thing to do. All right, so what else? It feels like so straightforward, but sometimes it's good to have a gentle reminder. So another thing I'd say is to, what would I say? So keeping up with your family, you are making it to class. Be mindful of who your mentor is, and you might want to change that pretty quickly if you see that things aren't happening. But I think one thing in itself is maybe don't get too attached to an idea or a preconceived notion of what a mentor is. They're just possibly an upper level student who just signed up to be able to help students, but they might not know how. So in any case, don't expect someone to be like a law school buddy, more like somebody who's been around the campus and can tell you a thing or two. But depending on who you are matched with, it may go better, it may be worse. It really just depends on who you are, who they are, and where you're at. So don't expect too much from your mentor as far as like the law school, if they assign it there. And you could potentially have like an actual attorney mentor. That was nice. But there's only so much that it can do to some degree as well. And yeah, I'd say don't even rely on mentorship to some degree. Like you really, by the time you're in law school, you should be pretty much more autonomous than relying on a mentor of any kind to steer you in the right direction or to give you pep talks or advice, because they already went through it, or they went through some of it as far as like a law school student that's a peer, and they're just going to tell you what you're hearing maybe your professors tell you. So don't put the responsibility on them. All right, so another tip I'd say, utilize tutors sooner than towards the end. There was a time when I didn't really know what to do with the tutor, but it wasn't until the very end that I actually started to use the tutor, and then it made a difference. So I'd say if your place has the resources to assign or have tutors readily available, do your readings, find something that didn't make sense to you, and go ahead and bring that forth to them so that you guys can talk about it together. Even if you have no questions, it doesn't hurt to be engaged in a flow of conversation on, I don't know, one of Civ Pro's, what is it, 14A, 14B, or 7A, 7A? Yeah, those were some popular ones. Where is it, 14C? 14C might have been popular, but I don't know. If you're in law school, you know what numbers you've seen so far as Civ Pro is concerned. But go ahead and engage in dialogue. I remember I met a lawyer at a big law firm. Well, I didn't meet them there, but they came to the campus. They had graduated from where we were. And he just started sparking conversation about the different Civ Pro sections of what the rules were for. I felt a little bit proud. I can look back on that and refer to that as a nice experience, being quizzed on that pop quiz, and I knew my stuff to some degree. So be engaged in a flow of dialogue about these things. If you have people who are willing to listen to you beyond your immediate environment, talk to them about random things that you're reading. Record yourself. I never did that, but I think that might be helpful. All right, so let's go on to the next thing that I'd say, and that's going to be beware of upper level law students' advice. That is one big thing. There was a saying at my school that I went to. Well, I can't really say it's my school because I don't have a degree from them, but at that place they would say, C's get degrees. And when I first got there, I was a little bit panicked because they just kept saying or insinuating that not everybody's gonna make it through this year, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just like, how do I not have that happen? So I kept asking people, what have you done? You know, what was your strategy? And this is why I talk about people depending on Reddit to guide their LSAT journeys. Like, you have to be self-reliant at some point. You can't just take all these different points of view and not find your own path to some degree. So, like I was saying, so one person would have one strategy, another person would have another strategy, and then another person would have another strategy, and then they talk about these resources that they'd use as an upper level law student, and they recommend maybe I use them. I think somebody gave me an old outline from somebody who had taken the teacher's test before, because I had unfortunately fallen behind on my readings. That's why I'm speaking directly from experience. You know, if you want to know how to feel, what best person to know or to learn about how to feel than from someone who's done it, right? You can't get all of your advice from people who've done it well. You have to be able to figure out what also goes wrong with people so you don't do it. Anyway, so I didn't really use all of the outlines, but I did start to try to, like, as I was driving, listen to these recaps of the rules and things of that nature. But I think for me, it's like a lot too late. It was just a lot going on, and you just really need to keep up with everything straight from the top. The cashing up thing, it doesn't really work in law school, I'm honestly gonna say. So that's something. You wanna be mindful of absorbing everybody else's tips, and then you yourself don't know what you need to do, and then maybe it's like about finals, and now you're starting to click on portions of contracts in the UCC. So yeah, keep up with everything from the top and start to find your own path a little bit sooner than just asking people and taking in all this advice, because everybody has some advice. Some is good, some is bad, or some things work for others and don't work for others who try the same thing. So you really have to be a little bit more self-led. All right, and I feel like that might be about it. That might be about it. All right, so this is gonna be a bonus before, I think I'm gonna just add in my story at the end here. Depending on where you are, it might be a very long time before you know how you did. You might have some idea about how you did, but you're not really sure, and you will be unfortunately waiting a little bit before you hear how you did. I'm honestly gonna tell you, at least that's what happened to me. So I literally found out how I did on my first semester about the week of the next semester's classes. And boy, oh boy, was that was a rough time. So yeah, those are some recaps. And let me see, did I leave off anything? If no one wants to hear my story. What would I say? Yeah, I think that sums it up. That sums it up. Okay. All right. So, if you're still listening and you wanted to hear about my own story, I'm going to go down to it now. All right. So, I originally took the LSAT in the summer of 2019. I originally was going to take it a little bit earlier than that, but I realized that I could get a fee waiver, so I canceled the original one, and then I re-signed up. I don't know if re-sign is the right phrasing, but basically I signed up again to take it in June. Didn't really study. I used Khan Academy, but I didn't really watch the videos. I bought the trainer too, and I wasn't really looking at it too much. I just saw all these diagrams and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So I kind of looked through and I was like, nah, there's gotta be an easier way than this. So I was like, no, I can't. So as people have said, I was doing the strategy of choosing an answer, seeing it was wrong, and then, oh, okay, well, I guess, okay, now let me just try again, see if I get the next one right. You know, things gotta change. You just look at what the right one is, and then you'll eventually get the points. So about a month, I'd say, of time studying, because Khan Academy had like this system where you would keep putting in your test date, and I would shift it a little bit earlier than I was taking it. So then it would ask me to take more PTs, and I barely did. I didn't really do any PTs, honestly. I just did the questions, or I would just try to get a PT done so it would say that I followed the guidelines on the Khan Academy thing. So that was not useful as someone who knows about the LSAT and doing it the proper way. So I went ahead and took it. First of all, I'm a slower driver, and it took me longer than it should have for me to get there, at least according to GPS. I had been in the area, but not to that specific place. So you want to make sure that when you're doing the LSAT, that you're familiar with the place you're doing it if you do it in person, because that was my first one and I did it in person. So after that, I pull up at the place. I was used to not parking, having to put money in a meter. So when I got there and I saw the meters, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Why isn't there just a place for me to pull up and just go and take my test? This is slowing me down. I'm already barely getting here. I'm seeing people at the door trying to get in. And here I am, scrambling through my car, scrambling through my purse, trying to find some coins to put into the meter so that I can get in. And unfortunately, I did not have enough money, and I got a ticket. I was not happy about that. Well, at least they didn't tow my car because I was very far from my home. So I took the test. It was pen and paper, or pencil and paper. It was a lot longer than it is now, or at least it felt that way, as far as the content as well. And back then they had logic games. I need to fact check, but I feel like it wasn't even 4 sections. I feel like we had 5. And until recently, I could still see my old copy, but I didn't save it, so it's gone. I guess I have to email them if I want it. But yeah, so I eventually got it done, and I believe in prayer. I believe in faith. Don't do this. Don't do it that way. Don't do it that way. So I got a 144, and I already knew that I was going to get in. I knew that I was going to get in. I absolutely knew it, and I justified myself with taking it this way, going into law school with this mediocre score, because I'm like, well, people spend loans on foolish investments. If I invest my money the right way, since I have the opportunity to even have a loan, like some people, they just don't even have the ability to pursue education. Like, this is a privilege, even if I have to pay loans in the future. So that was my self-justification for going in there with a mediocre LSAT score. So I had already written a nice personal statement, and I already had anticipated doing well within the context of me writing my personal statement. I was in contact with one of the people on campus. I didn't have strings. I didn't have strings attached or connections. Well, my only connection was God. But I guess I squandered that connection, but thankfully he's still around. So I had basically let them know to hold my application for my June score, and once it got in, then I got accepted, and that was amazing. That was wonderful news. I got a call from the dean. I had that voicemail for a good while. I was just like so happy. It was amazing, especially as a person of color. I was like, yes, I broke a barrier. I'm one of the select people to be able to have this opportunity. Unfortunately, that very same day, I heard news about a friend who the last time I had seen them, they disappeared before I was able to tell them goodbye. And, I actually needed their phone number. I didn't have it anymore. So next thing you know, I looked around, they were gone. And the day I got my acceptance letter, that same evening, I heard that they were gone. And it was a dark day. It was raining. And I was just like, wow, life. And this was the first time where I could kind of think about knowing someone and not having something end on the right terms, and then they're just gone from this world. And I it was rough. And at that point, I didn't think to withdraw my acceptance. I didn't know what to do really in a way. I was shocked, but this was a good opportunity, and I just kept moving forward to some degree. But that wasn't really in the best footing. So you can already hear 2 strikes against me. Going in, winging the LSAT, and then realizing that I might be a little bit mentally disturbed as far as this news, but I still went ahead and continued forward. So I wonder if I need to do a separate video on this. Okay. So I go to the campus. I had never gone to the campus before. It seemed like it would be a good idea. There was just something about this particular school that kind of stood out to me. And I thought, this place should be a nice place to study. But it was the only school at our state's capital, I believe. So that is a part of the reason, like, it sounded like it would be a good choice. They also had like some nice pictures of diverse people on the website. There's nothing that stood out to me as I was considering applying, but in hindsight, I think about that as being on there. And I realized as time went on that the school was a bit too small for me. Sometimes I need to find a study room and I want to be away from people, but it was a small campus. So at some point, somebody might look through the door and see me in there, or I'll be in an area where I'd hope that nobody would see me, but I would run into someone else. And a lot of my problems too was seeing people and getting caught up in conversation. And that had nothing to do with the fact that I went to a lower tier school. Unfortunately, from that very first week of class, when I heard this news, I think one of my books came in late too, I started to fall behind on the readings. And that very first week, that orientation week, it moved so quickly. And that was a part of your grade. And then from there, they would decide if you needed to be in a support program. And ultimately, I ended up in that. And then continuing forward, my commute was long. It was about 3 hours daily. And by the time I would get back to my house, I would be pretty much exhausted. And there was this tug of war within me, like to either go back to the house and study, where chances are after the long commute I would feel already depleted, or to stay on campus and potentially run into people because the campus was so small. And then sometimes to kind of de-stress, I'd go to the events that were on campus. I'd at least finish maybe some of my readings, but as far as the case briefing, that's definitely an area where I wasn't necessarily keeping up with. I loved torts. I absolutely loved torts. But apart from that, especially Civ Pro, it was like a little bit rough for me, and in terms of taking our information and applying it to different, I think they call them fact sets. Don't quote me on that. It's been years. But yeah. So ultimately, towards the end, I literally right around the end, things started to click better for me, especially when it came to contracts. That grade had a higher bump than the others. I actually had at least 2 C's, but through the curve, those were knocked down. And then my property law class was also pretty intensive, and it had like 4 credits, so the weight of it was so heavy that did not help my situation. They had already suggested that I should probably drop that course, but I did not want to admit defeat, and I hung on to that class, and then ultimately I wasn't able to continue forward from there. So that's precisely how not to do law school. You know, if you're having some rough times, like there was some difficulties with the housing situation at that time, and then also healing would have been good, because in addition to hearing about what happened with my friend, I also had experienced something not too long prior that I hadn't really resolved. So it's a mixture of living and life happening, and pretty much through all of this, it just shows you the importance of slowing down. You know, I hear a lot of people talking about how they don't want people studying for the LSAT as long as they had, or you shouldn't be studying super long for this test, yada, yada, yada. But to some degree, it's all right to take your time. What are you rushing towards? Are you rushing towards failure? Or are you rushing towards success? And definitely to my KJD people, those are people after my original heart, because I was somebody who liked to just like get things done and rush through things. Depending on who you are, that might be a good thing for you, to stay disciplined and you have the momentum, you have the drive, and you're doing things the right way. That's good. But then there's sometimes other people where they can benefit from slowing down a little bit. There's no need to rush. Get some time working at a law firm. Get some time saving money. Get some time getting your best score. Let's not fixate on this idea of getting the 170 plus if maybe that's not your personal best. Maybe your personal best is a 165. And maybe you don't need to go to a T14 or T1 to T14 to have a great time. Because it really doesn't matter where you're going if you have the ability to outshine everybody else. If you are disciplined and you put in your work ethic. My school was a lower tier school, but I knew someone, and there's probably others, I just never connected with them, but I knew at least one person in Big Law. So that school, although it was lower tier, and although they might have struggled with their bar passage rate, that person was working in Big Law. They talked about those long hours that they had to work. And a lot of the times when people want to go to the higher accredited schools, they're talking about big law. But big law is stressful. It's stressful. I think one thing my experience did for me that I don't think anybody can really talk about who's maybe had straight success, reasonably so, is the amount of loneliness or just the feeling of after I wasn't able to return that next semester, of how ostracized I felt from the community that I had once belonged in. It was depressing. It was rough. You know, nobody, I think, really understood everything that was going on in my headspace and what I was navigating daily, and the living conditions at the time. It was just basically, we were in an area where heating, you need to have your heating in order, otherwise things wouldn't go well. So that with other things going on there, it just made for a harder time. And people do overcome, they do go through all these types of challenges and they come out at the end. But although I had petitioned to get back in and that school denied me, I think I'm much better for it. So much so that now I can be a voice, a reason to other minorities who want to jump on these opportunities and they just want to get their foot in the door. It's okay to take your time and really strive to do your personal best. And then keep going. Keep going. I wonder if I could talk to this one of those law students. She was excellent. She was an upper level student and she was African American like me, and she worked her butt off at this lower tier school that people like to talk about not going to. She worked her butt off. She did her stuff. She had those connections because of her work ethic. So no matter where you go, your work ethic, it speaks for yourself. It speaks for you. All right. Well, this is a very, very long episode. This is another one I'm not sure I'm going to put on on the website, or on YouTube rather. But this is an eye-opening take on this idea that you must go to an upper level school in order to succeed. One of the people, African American, might I say, who had gotten into this lower tier school with me, that same school year that I went in, I heard that he had a 134. I know that rumors could be inaccurate, but a lot of the African Americans at that school, they were in the lower LSAT range. And I believe he had a 134, but he was showing up and showing out regularly. He was doing his thing. And he definitely graduated, and I'm sure he's doing well. So once again, it's not about where you're going, but it's about your work ethic and always striving to do your ultimate best. And that's going to be today's episode. Shine wherever you are. Strive to be your personal best. And take care for now. I'll see you guys in the next episode.